And then Chase Young gets traded from Washington to the San Francisco 49ers for a third rounder, which happens to be a third round compensatory pick, which is now allowed to be traded. So it's a pickup in the 90s, hundreds, right? High 90s, low hundreds comp pick for Chase Young to the Niners. The Niners have already added Randy Gregory this year as well.
They are assembling multiple players that seem perfectly fit for that the kind of what I think people still call the D Ford role opposite Nick Bosa, that sort of designated speed rusher on the other side to an already ridiculous defensive line. There were multiple moves made yesterday at the trade deadline where my initial reaction was kind of like, did the other team not know that this was a deal available? Like, did Washington not know that the better edge rusher was also available for less than they paid? Or did the Bears, rather, not know that the better edge rusher on Washington was actually available for less than they paid for the guy they brought in?
I don't know that Chase Young is better than Montez Sweat.
I think we do know that Chase Young is better than Montez Sweat. We don't know that he'll be playing as much as Montez Sweat.
With the injury history, Montez Sweat, his dependability,
articulate for me in
really
a way,
good against the run.
Articulate for me in a way that does not include playing time. How Montez Sweat is
War
better.
includes playing time. I think they're comparable players.
I don't think they are at all.
I think they're comparable players.
There's no way you can make that case from their NFL careers. Like, Chase Young has been a markedly better pass rusher than Montez Sweat. Now, you can say Montez Sweat has been a better run defender, but...
Yeah, aren't their grades similar when they've been on the field?
No.
Pretty sure they have.
Chase Young's have been better, and they're better this year than they've ever been. And when you consider the injuries that he's been dealing with.
Chase Young's never had a season grade higher than Sweat's 86 last year. Are you looking at the right guy?
His rookie year was better than that.
Higher than 86?
87.1, right out of the gate.
Yeah, well, he wasn't hurt.
Then he got hurt, right? And we had grades in the 70s, 75, 78. And then we're bouncing back this year with a career high.
Pass rusher.
Right, with a career high in pass rushing grade. He's still only 24, and he was this world of, we're reaching the end of it now, but given a guy's injury history, like, priors still matter. He was arguably the best pass rushing prospect we'd ever seen come into the NFL. That's still relevant when you're talking about what he can be now that he's fully healthy, going to a team that already has a stupidly good defensive line and defense overall.
It is the injury concern.
Correct.
I mean, I would rather take a swing on Chase Young because I do think that upside is there. I get it, but I'm trying to not downplay, I think, how good I think Montez Sweat actually is.
But my point being,
but Chase Young upside is crazy.
We went into this collectively all sort of saying, Washington had put themselves in this weird spot. And there's a discussion to be had there, by the way, that they got rid of both these guys.
I do want to go back and revisit that for a second.
But they had put themselves in this weird spot where, because they didn't pick up Chase Young's fifth-year option and Montez Sweat's contract is expiring, now you've got two different edge rushers represented by the same person, and you were only going to be able to keep one of them because of that, right? There's no way of playing one off against the other and getting a deal done. The most you could do is one franchise tag, and one of them walks out in free agency. So it made sense for them to move one of them, and all the reports before the deadline were Montez Sweat was the guy who was fielding the calls, and he was the one that looked like he was on the way out. They end up shipping both of them out, which kind of, and because Chase Young goes for less, despite being younger, better, and playing better right now, I think, you're kind of left with the idea of, did Chicago not know that they could have had him as well? It sort of feels like buyer's remorse almost. Hey, we got a deal done. We got our guy. And then an hour later, Chase Young goes for a lower pick, a significantly lower pick.
The injury question marks they're not just I admit I brush past the injury concerns a lot when we do our analysis. Because first off, I don't have official medicals, and I'm not a doctor. But secondly...
even if you did have official medicals, they would be meaningless.
They'd be meaningless. Yeah. But secondly, because I like shiny things and names. And so Chase Young, the name, of course, is more attractive than Montez Sweat. But if you're the Bears and you're sitting there in the building and you're like, I can have Montez Sweat, durable, know what I'm going to get, consistency, Chase Young, the injury... Is he the same as he was a couple of years ago? Is the upside still really there? That is a debate that is not just Chase Young's definitely is better and younger. Let's grab him, right? So those are real debates. in discussions within the building.
They are, but I think those only get you as far as saying Montez Sweat is about as good as Chase Young because he's a worse player, but he's more durable and hasn't been injured, and he's probably going to play more. I don't think that gets you as far as saying he's worth not just a whole round more in draft pick, but they're the opposite extremes of the round, right? So it's basically 2 rounds difference is what they're paying.
60. It's about 60 picks of difference.
Yeah, which is about 2 rounds worth, right? So I don't see how you can get there, even factoring in the fact that Chase Young has been injured, which, by the way, might not be a thing going forward. It's just, yes, he has missed a lot of time, but we don't know if that's going to be a factor going forward. So that, to me, I find it difficult to believe that Chicago saw the second deal and was happy.
Maybe. I want to go back from a Washington perspective, though. Deron Payne was the guy that kind of put all of this in motion. Not him specifically, but Washington re-signing him to a $22.5 million deal this offseason. At the time, I was thinking, okay, you have Jonathan Allen locked up. They signed Deron Payne to a massive deal, and then they neglected Chase Young's 5th-year option. And I was like, okay, something's coming to a head here because you got to pay Montez Sweat at some point, or you're going to see what you have in Chase Young and try to pay him. You certainly can't pay both. And it turns out it's going to be neither of them. Deron Payne, from just a pure grading standpoint, is not going to look as good as Sweat or Chase Young. From a scarcity standpoint, a 320-pounder who could play nose, play over the guard, and be an effective player. He's been a top 20 player, Deron Payne, from a PFF WAR standpoint over the last 2 years. From a scarcity standpoint, I kind of get it. Like, there's not a whole lot of 320-pounders who can do that type of stuff that Deron Payne does. But I don't think in isolation he's a better player than Montez Sweat or Chase Young. So I really thought that the Commanders paid the 4th best defensive lineman on their team $22 million plus per year at a 4-year contract. I'm not saying it was completely wrong because it's a different role, but that made me think, man, I'd still rather have Chase Young and Montez Sweat, I think, going forward if I can. And so now we're at a point where Washington has no edge defenders, and they've got, this rebuild on their hands. But I think they're debating, hey, we could pay Deron Payne, and then what can we get for those 2 other guys? So I always use the balance sheet example. In Washington's balance sheet, it's I can have Deron Payne plus what I can get from Chase Young and Montez Sweat, which turned out to be a 2nd and a 3rd, right? That's what I'm getting versus letting Deron Payne walk, getting a similar comp pick probably, but also keeping one of those edge defenders. So that's what they're weighing there, I guess. I don't think it's terrible, but I don't know if that's the route I would have gone.
Yeah, it's just a notable departure from the previous MO from that franchise, which tended to be not getting anything for players, right? Like the Kirk Cousins thing, right? We'll dither and we'll franchise and then we'll let him walk and we'll get nothing for it. That was their sort of strategy, not even strategy, like they were getting pilloried for it, but that was what tended to happen as players would leave Washington and they would get nothing out of it. Here, they've gone the exact opposite direction and said, okay, we put ourselves in this ugly back against the wall scenario. Then rather than damage limitation, let's get rid of one and try and re-sign the other. They've just gone to hell with it. Let's cash in now, get what we can for both of them. Even though, they're reasonably competitive this year. They could be a playoff team. I mean, they could shoot for that wild card spot in the NFC. And they've gone, nope, we're cashing in now. We're getting what we can. Just a complete about-face in terms of how they usually operate with a new owner.
I think it's smart. I mean, we've talked about the 7 seed in the NFC is so wide open. Literally any team, like the Panthers, are still in the mix for the 7 seed in the NFC. But Washington knows as a franchise they need to try to leapfrog the Cowboys and the Eagles,
right,
who are way ahead of them. So it is the right move there. From a 49ers perspective, we now look at a defensive line, as I tweeted yesterday. Could you imagine telling 2019 self, in 4 years, Nick Bosa and Chase Young are going to be reunited in the NFL on the same defensive line? It seems crazy. Right?
Yeah.
But Nick Bosa and Chase Young to go with Randy Gregory and Cleveland Farrell and Drake Jackson on the edge. And at defensive tackle, you have Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead. You also have Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens. I mean, they are literally 9 deep in legitimate NFL players and 5 or 6 deep in above average NFL starters. 5 or 6 deep on that defensive line. So loading up in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Chase Young, given the way he's playing now and given that he's been healthy this year, and by the way, not just healthy, but he's been playing most of the snaps. Like, they're not keeping him, on a pitch count. They're not limiting his workload. He's playing the whole time he is back. If that continues this season, even though Washington has a good defensive line, like, it's not like he's gone from the Myles Garrett situation from a year ago when it was him and nobody else. He's had good help around him. I think that 49ers defense is a better situation for him to excel than it was in Washington.
Chase Young, as of this year, you're right. Chase Young is playing better than Montez Sweat this year. I'm not arguing that point, but Chase Young, number 13 most valuable edge so far this year. And despite what some may say about Nick Bosa, he's up at number 2 most valuable. Still winning, still defeating blocks. I know the Niners defenses look trashed the last couple weeks, but Nick Bosa is still doing his job.